Quebec Premier Francois Legault is facing criticism for some of his solutions to deal with immigration issues, including calling on the federal government to create waiting zones for asylum seekers and relocating them to other provinces. Abdulla Daoud works for the Refugee Centre in Montreal, an organization that helps asylum seekers integrate in Canada, and he joins me this morning. Nice to see you, Abdulla.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so how is your organization currently dealing with, I think everyone agrees, Quebec takes on perhaps more than its fair share of asylum claimants. How is your organization dealing with that right now?
Well, I think we've been dealing with it like how we've been dealing with it since 2017, right? We've seen the numbers increase since then, and we've adapted to the increasing numbers. And the challenge really is that asylum seekers or refugee claimants are kind of excluded from the resettlement world, right, or from resettlement services in Canada. Federal funding or provincial funding doesn't allow organizations to serve refugee claimants. And thus, they're kind of excluded. So organizations like ours, who are few and far apart, have to kind of do a lot of the work and catching up.
And what do you, let's talk about, I guess, the two primary issues that the Premier has put on the table. First of all, the waiting zones, which has been done in France, in some European countries, where you basically put asylum seekers in one area, a holding center, till some sort of decision is made. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think it's odd, first of all, to kind of suggest something that we kind of know from data doesn't work. I mean, this is a program that Human Rights Watch criticizes and calls inhumane. We've seen multitude of problems coming out of it. It has very poor outcomes, and it typically doesn't have a human approach or even a social approach for integration for these individuals. So I'm not really sure what the end goal for those waiting zones would be, but it doesn't seem to produce any really good outcomes.
I'm not sure if you know, but would it be even legal to do that with asylum seekers?
I mean, that's something that's been brought up a couple of times by opposition parties that seems to be not legal, and it's not. We can't force individuals to go to certain places. We do have freedom of movement within Canada, so that's not really something that I think will probably get challenged in the courts quite quickly if it was to happen.
The other issue that he's put forward is moving asylum seekers. And to be fair, that is something the federal government is also interested in doing, moving people across the country if provinces are willing to take them. How realistic is that? How possible is that?
I think it's very realistic in terms of like voluntary movement. I think what's odd about the response that we're seeing from leadership in Quebec is that Quebec actually does very good with refugee claimants. We have a really good system. We actually have an amazing organization that's provincially funded called PRIDA. That's a reception center for refugee claimants, and has great outcomes. Those are the type of systems that we'd want to see in other provinces, and those would be the pull factors or the other areas or type of services that we'd like to see in other provinces that Quebec could take a lead on by example for others to implement, to create that kind of voluntary movement and social responsibility sharing among other provinces in Canada.
Do you think that Quebec takes on too much, like it's a function of geography, I guess, but do you think that Quebec is asking to do too much when it comes to asylum seekers?
I think asking for waiting zones or creating makeshift camps at airports is a bit odd. I think we're asking for the wrong things. I think this is an issue that we've been flagging now since 2017. We've seen the world change. We have the most displaced individuals in the world in modern history. It's only increasing. So it's a reality that we have to face. So we kind of have to shift both federally and provincially our internal infrastructures to deal with it, right? It's not something that we can control. Individuals are coming to seek safety, whether we like it or not, right? So it's a matter of asking the right questions, making the right movements, and unfortunately, we're just not seeing that right now.
What do you make of the Premier's comments? How did they make you feel when he made those suggestions?
Like that, it made me feel a bit odd because I feel like Quebec has a lot to be proud of in the way we've received refugee claimants and what we've done with refugee claimants. And I think we should have led by example rather than create kind of polarizing language. So it was very disappointing.
Abdulla Daoud, thank you for doing this morning. Nice to speak with you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
The reality is that if you were to have this sort of system, what impact would that have on someone coming here? Would they avoid those? Would they declare at the airport? Would they declare inland? So these things have to make sense. And first and foremost, Rafi, they have to be humane and humanitarian in nature.
That's Immigration Minister Mark Miller responding to Francois Legault's ideas of waiting zones. The federal government has been questioning the Premier's plans, and they've been accusing him of playing politics. Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Louis Blouin, the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Radio-Canada, Sherelle Evelyn, the Managing Editor of the Hill Times, they're both in Ottawa, and Tyler Dawson, the Alberta correspondent for the National Post. He's in Canmore, Alberta this morning. I probably should start with Louis, but I'm going to start with Sherelle to sort of get your perspective, as we're not as deep into Quebec politics perhaps as Louis, but this is a very, I don't quite understand the Premier's motivation here, and there is nobody that is taking these ideas and saying those are great solutions. Let's move forward here. Sherelle, what do you make of what the Premier's saying and doing?
Yeah, they kind of come across to me as, less plans and kind of more half-baked suggestions that are kind of made out of desperation from a political point of view at this point. You can use the euphemism waiting zones for this idea, but you look at what they're actually called. They're called detention centers. So we're talking about putting people who are, fleeing from, an unsafe situation and essentially jailing them until some sort of administrative decision can be made. I don't want to, take away from the fact that, yes, there are issues when there are too many pressures put on services and housing and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with people and not numbers. Yeah. So when you have that at the heart of it, it is really difficult to kind of understand how these potential ideas of, forcibly relocating people or putting people in these waiting zones or detention centers is kind of like the key issue here, as opposed to, is this something for Premier Legault to say, hey, I care about immigration. I've campaigned on it in the past. I've wanted it in the past, but I haven't delivered. And now that I'm feeling a lot of heat from the opposition and from the Parti Québécois, I feel like I need to do something to really show Quebecers that I'm serious. And I don't know if that is really, going hand in hand with treating people humanely.
Tyler, it is true that Quebec takes a lot of asylum claimants and that is a strain on their services for sure. But it is also true that the federal government has said, here's money to help you deal with this. They're not asking Quebec to do it all by themselves. Yeah,
and there's been requests, I think, for more money. Quebec has made that request as well, and I'm not sure that request has been met. I think generally speaking, outside of Quebec, this is not exclusively a Quebec issue, although it is Ontario and Quebec that take the most refugee claimants. And that, as you sort of alluded to earlier, is a function mainly of having the Montreal and Toronto airports in their jurisdiction. But the thing that I think really comes up in all of this, on the idea of a holding center, I mean, we more or less tried that during COVID for people who are isolating when they came into the country. And I don't know if anyone would argue that was a smashing success. And on the subject of forcible relocation, well, it's going to be very hard, even if you do find a way around whatever legal and ethical issues could exist there. The other premiers in the country are not going to be all that fond of that idea either. So it's very strange in some ways because Premier Legault has said, well, I haven't thought about all of these questions. It's the federal government's responsibility to sort them out. But, I don't know if you can just sort of lob that bomb into the political discussion and then leave it for someone else to sort out. Yeah.
So, Louis, maybe you can explain what you think is going on politically, because the other piece of this is that Francois Legault was also at the Sommet de la Francophonie in France, as well as the Prime Minister, and he raised it again and again and again on the international stage. I don't know if the goal was to embarrass the federal government or the Prime Minister, but he certainly had some sort of political motivation about talking about it there.
I think he was trying to invent a new Olympic discipline, Rosemary, this week, that we maybe could call political improvisation, seeing his minister, Jean-François Roberge, in Quebec City trying to explain what the Premier was trying to say, saying, maybe he's trying to say that we could distribute some work permits for different provinces. It's not the first time that Francois Legault is hammering the immigration issue on the federal government, but this time I feel that it's been a bit sideways. It went a bit sideways on him. First, because of the legality of his proposal. There's a lot of experts who are raising the Article 7 in the Canadian Charter of Rights. There's also the applicability. Even if you give a work permit for somebody to go in another province, how do you make sure that they stay there? Are you going to make some surveillance around them? How do you do that? And there's also the political logic around it. So Legault is asking Justin Trudeau to impose on other provinces what he would never accept himself politically. So it's all, it seems to be all the other way around. And I feel in all that is going on, it's a bit of a certain state of panic for Francois Legault. He's trying to do some diversions. It's worked for him in the past to talk about immigration. And it's true that Quebec has received more than its share, and there's a strain in social services, but I see more as a reaction, a political reaction of a premier that is in trouble. The Parti Québécois is leading in the polls. This is hurting him bad. So I guess he's trying to exploit that nationalist sentiment maybe with the immigration issue and try to get the discussion going for him. But this week it seemed that it went a bit off the line. But we'll see, because the thing is, it doesn't seem that he's trying to look for any solutions here. I think he's more looking to score political points. There's no constructive suggestion that he's made. But to be fair, I don't feel that Mr. Miller has been very constructive himself when he talked about those three premiers from New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Alberta, that he called them nono in French, which he translated later as knuckleheads. So are we really looking at a solution here? I don't see it.
Yeah, and it is true, Sherelle, that immigration is a point of vulnerability for the government right now, the federal government, and they're aware of that. They're having to revise their numbers and change their ideas because of the strain immigration is putting on the country writ large.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a really tricky balance I've been watching from the federal government, because the Liberals want to hold on to this long-held Canadian consensus that, immigration is good and this is what we need and this is how our country was built, while acknowledging that, numbers are high and there's abuses of the system, while also not falling into the trap of xenophobia that they are really quick to also kind of accuse others of. So by saying, we can't bring people in, or these people are the wrong type of people, and all those types of things. So it is a really awkward balancing act. And given everything that's happened, outside of Canada over the last few years, it's not necessarily something that Canadians can control when it comes to how many people want to come in. So finding a way to deal with the kind of shift in paradigm is also difficult.
20 seconds to you, Tyler.
Well, I think you've got the political side of this, and politics over immigration numbers and things like that are not particularly new. I mean, we went through a whole refugee debate in the 2015 election. I think what everyone should maybe be keeping an eye on is what's happening in the polling numbers for regular Canadians, and the numbers of people who are listing immigration as sort of a top political concern they're way higher than they were even a couple of years ago. And there's been a long-held consensus, as was just mentioned, and we need to worry about that fracturing.
Yeah, I got to go. Louis, I'm so glad you came on. Thank you. Please come again.
That was fun.
Sherelle and Tyler, thank you as always for being here. We'll see you all again soon. Thanks.